Matters of public interest, I shall call the member for Nananga.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, Queenslanders expect their health system to care for them when they are sick. But last week, the sick were turned away from emergency departments. Queenslanders turned up to hear that their hospitals in South East Corner were full. Our health system in Queensland was plunged into a full-scale crisis. It was unprecedented, but, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it simply wasn't a surprise. Labor's health crisis has been building since the day Anastasia Palaszczuk got elected as Premier of that the member for Inala got elected as Premier in this state. We've seen corridors crammed with patients on stretchers because there are no beds left. We've seen doctors forced to give mothers DIY birthing kits because Labor has shut maternity services in the bush. We've seen cancerous transplant tissue given to 4 children. I've stood side by side the mother of a child who had chemo in the kitchen of the Lady Salento Children's Hospital. Regional towns are crying out for more doctors and more nurses. Ambulance ramping has jumped to 25%. But nothing, Mr Deputy Speaker, is worse than Labor telling Queenslanders that their hospitals are full. Nothing could be worse than that. But worse, Mr Deputy Speaker, Labor then blamed the patients for the hospitals being full. The hospitals ran out of beds, but the Premier never runs out of excuses. The Premier first of all, she blamed the feds. Then she blamed the winter flu. Oh no, it was the summer flu. Then the Premier blamed the elderly. Mr Deputy Speaker, it was a national embarrassment. No other state is experiencing any form of health crisis like that we see here in Queensland. We had Simon Judkins, the president of the Australasian College for Emergency Medicine. Now, he called it a crisis. We had Beth Mole, the Queensland Nurses Union. Now, she called it a crisis. But the Premier said, oh no, they're wrong, nothing to see here. The Premier, in fact, just said the system was working just as it was intended. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, it may be how the Palaszczuk government intends the health system to work, but it certainly isn't how the LNP and every Queenslander expects their health system to work. It is arrogant. It is an arrogant government that blames everyone but themselves. Mr Speaker, now we see everyone in Queensland knowing what a code yellow is, thanks to the Labor government. But, Mr Speaker, we then saw the Health Minister come out and said the hospitals have returned to normal. Nothing to see here. And what did we see of the Health Minister? Well, he finished last week by posting on social media having a cup of coffee. He was like, I've had such a big day, I need to sit down, give myself a pat on the back and have a coffee. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, what the Health Minister should have been doing was thanking the hard-working doctors and nurses and admin staff who had to battle through this crisis, and thank the patients for having patience, for waiting for the Palaszczuk government to fix up their own crisis that was made by the Palaszczuk government. They are the people that need a break, not this Health Minister giving himself a nice little pat on the back and having a cup of coffee. Well, Mr Speaker, Queenslanders deserve a government that is going to put the health of Queenslanders first. But those opposites' only priority when it comes to health is ripping the name of Lady Salento down off the Children's Hospital. LNP would never waste taxpayers' money. And, Mr Speaker, we are the ones listening to the concerns of frontline health workers. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I am sure
Order, members.
I am sure I speak on behalf of the whole House when I pay tribute to the Mayor of Brisbane, Lord Mayor Graham Quirk. And they say nice guys always finish last. Well, Graham Quirk proves they don't. He is a gentleman, humble, kind and honest. And I congratulate Councillor Adrian Schrinner on being chosen as his successor. I also congratulate Deputy Mayor Krista Adams. They have a tough act to follow. Now, Graham Quirk will be remembered as one of the city's best ever mayors. Mayor of Brisbane is the biggest job in local government, and Graham Quirk was born to do it. Just look at his legacy. The Clem 7 Tunnel, Airport Link, Go-Between Bridge, Legacy Way Tunnel, $4 billion worth of road upgrades. The Mayor and his LNP team knew Brisbane had to build the infrastructure for the future. And so Lord Mayor Graham Quirk got to work. If only, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Palaszczuk Labor government had some of that Quirk ethic. The only mark Labor have left on Brisbane is tearing down the Lady Salento Hospital sign. That is their landmark project for Brisbane. Lord Mayor Graham Quirk has shown Queensland just how bad the Palaszczuk government is. His achievements have put this Labor state government to absolute shame. And he didn't just build infrastructure, he delivered 40 all-ability playgrounds, city hopper ferries, the City of Light project, the South East Queensland City deal, and he would have started building Brisbane Metro by now if this Labor government had got off its behind. So when it comes to transport infrastructure, the Palaszczuk government is always late, just like our trains. And this week we've seen even more excuses, more finger-pointing, more delays from the Transport Minister over the M1. The federal government, Mr Deputy Speaker, has put down another $500 million to upgrade the M1 between Daisy Hill and the Logan motorway. This opportunity should be grabbed with two hands, Minister, with two hands. But what have we heard from this Transport Minister? It's the same whining that we've heard for the last 4 years. But no one is listening, and Bill Shorten definitely isn't. He thinks Queensland's priority. He thinks, Mr Deputy Speaker, that Queensland should pay for half the costs of the M1. Now, I appreciate that the Treasurer in Queensland has not given the Transport Minister enough money to spend on infrastructure. But if he wasn't paying $422,000 a week in overtime for QR, he might have some money to spend on the roads.
Order. Member for Miller. Member for Broadwater. Don't need to wink at me. Order. Call the member for Nanango.
Mr Speaker, I appreciate that the member for South Brisbane, the Queensland Treasurer, hasn't given the Transport Minister enough money to spend on infrastructure, and certainly if he wasn't paying almost $500,000 a week in overtime for QR drivers, he might have more money to spend on the roads. Queenslanders are sick of the excuses from the Labor government over the M1. The LNP built the M1, and we're the only ones who will guarantee the extra investment that it needs. Now, Mr Speaker, it has been 30 years since the Fitzgerald report was published. The report recommended compulsory preferential voting be scrapped in state elections, and for good reasons too. No one should be forced to vote for a party that they don't want to. But that is what Labor brought about when they teamed up with the Catters to change the voting system in the dead of night. Now, I was appalled.
Order. Order. Member for McConnell. Member for Nango, you have the call.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I was appalled by the statements made by Pauline Hanson and her One Nation sidekicks. John Howard's gun laws are not for sale and will never be. But we've heard nothing of those from the opposite other than fake outrage. We all know the truth and never forget the Palaszczuk Labor government is only here because of one nation preferences. Mr Speaker, it is those opposite who have bought in this system.
Order. Order, members. Member for Miller. Members, you don't need to be shouting across the chamber. You won't be quarrelling across the chamber, as the Speaker has already indicated. Member for Nanango, you have 18 seconds.
Mr Speaker, Labor have created this system. It is time to scrap CPV and bring back Just Vote 1. It is time to give democracy a go and bring back Just Vote 1.